Welcome back to another episode of Psychocinematic. Today's guest is Lorcan Finnegan. You may have already seen him on this podcast because he came on and talked about Vivarium before, which is one of my favorite films. And now he's back to talk about his new film, The Surfer, starring Nicolas Cage. How's it going, Lorcan?
Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Nice t-shirt. I have one of them.
Thank you. Yeah. Which, by the way, when you sent that to me, I was like, hell yeah. Like, almost no one sends me the photos of them with their stuff. So I was super pumped that you did.
No, no worries, man.
Yeah, last time you were on here, we were talking about Vivarium, and you were just about to go and shoot The Surfer. So was The Surfer actually shot in Australia?
Yeah, in Western Australia in a little
Okay.
town called Yallingup, about 3 hours south of Perth.
I noticed in the film that there's like a lot of bugs flying around and whatnot. Was it kind of difficult to shoot in Australia with the elements, whether it be the heat or I guess just nature there is everything seems like it wants to kill you?
Yeah, but that also lends itself to the story. So like it was
Hmm.
great. I was like happy about the flies. Like Nick has all these he's very sweaty in the film. Like he's sweatier than every other character. He was always like, why do I have to be the sweaty one? It's like, because he's the one who has to suffer the most. But we were adding like glycerin sweat, and the flies just love that. So like between takes, he'd have like a swarm of flies on his face. But he was very zen about all that. And like there's a scene with him and Julie McMahon when he's offering him food by the car and he's
Hmm.
holding his face. There's an outbreak of these flying ants that day, and they're crawling all over like Julian and Nick's face and kind of landing on the food. And I mean, that was just pure luck, you know?
I wrote down that scene specifically because I was like, first of all, they're all over Scally and not the surfer. And I was like, these don't look fake, but like the fact that he's not like freaking out, I was like, this is impressive.
I know. Yeah, well, they're quite long takes. We're shooting that scene with like two cameras, one on a big long lens and another kind of reverse, Um,
Mm,
and yeah, so all of those things, there was snakes. There was a guy who'd like collect the snakes from the car park, put them in a pillowcase, and release them somewhere else. It's a national park area, so there's like a lot of amazing birds, cockatoos, and there was kangaroos sheltering under trees, and amazing lizards and stuff like that. And then, so I think like being on location somewhere real like that's part of the story. It gets everybody, in the mood, and it's very inspiring to me and also to the composer who is Australian, but he came down and spent some time on location. So yeah, it ends up playing a character in the film almost.
hmm. And beyond that fact of Australia, was there any other reason that you guys wanted to shoot it there?
Yeah, well, the story. So Thomas Martin, the writer, wrote the story as a kind of an outline first treatment. It was only a couple of pages long, and we both like discussed it and thought, it could be a great opportunity to make a contemporary exploitation style film, like in the vein of the new wave Australian films, like Walkabout and Wake and Fright and Long Weekend and Picnic at Hanging Rock and the Last Wave. Um, so all of those kind of films were really inspirational to us as just like an audience when we were getting into filmmaking ourselves. In Ireland as well, like when we were in school, there was only a couple of channels on TV, and there was two shows that were both Australian. One was Neighbours and the other was Home and Away, and everybody watched them. So we kind of had this affinity with Australia growing up, and there's a show called Skippy as well, the bush kangaroo, and all this. So,
Hmm.
and I'd worked in Australia. I shot some commercials there, and Tom had adapted a novel down there as well. So it seemed like, yeah, a good time to go and make a film in Australia, and in the vein of like Ted Ketchup, who directed Wake and Fright, is Canadian, and Nick Rogue, who directed Walkabout, is British. So there's a kind of tradition of non-Australians coming to Australia to make a very Australian film, the
Hmm.
outsider's perspective. And Nick's character was playing the outsider as well. So it was like two Irish guys and the Polish cinematographer and the
Yeah.
Hollywood star going to Australia to make this film, and then everybody else was Australian, all the other cast and all the crew and everything.
Gotcha. And so I remember when you were talking about Vivarium, you were talking about shooting it in a couple different spots because of like tax incentives. Does Australia offer those similar types of incentives for filmmakers to come there?
Yeah, Western Australia. I mean, Screen West in Western Australia were very supportive of the films. Western Australia is massive. You know, it's basically a third of
Mm,
Australia. So, and I think they're trying to grow their industry on that coast because everybody else goes to the Gold Coast, or you know. So, it was it was exciting to go to a new location that hasn't really been in many films either. Like, I don't think any films have been shot in Yallingup. So yeah, but they were supportive, and yeah, Screen West helped us out.
yeah. So then you were saying that was in like a kind of national park area. Like, so you were able to just rent out that area for shooting for, you know, your month or however long you shot there.
Yeah, well, we had the car park for a certain period of time, then we had the beach for a certain period of time. Not all the time, but we still had to be you still had to allow public to go through it because it was like a
Mm.
trail. But it was quite quiet time of year, so you know, we were shooting a scene one time though, and like two backpackers walked through the back of this frame, and I was like, "Are they our extras?" And people were like, "They're not. We don't have any extras today." It was like, "Over." So yeah, we had control of the car park for a while, and they were actually going to basically demolish it and rebuild it after we shot there. So we had a good bit of freedom to be able to adapt things, put in our own lights and all that kind of stuff as well.
Cool. And then was that car park actually
Right
right
now.
next to
Yeah,
that beach or those? Okay.
yeah. So
Gotcha.
everything was there, which was great. Like I was
Mm.
trying to find a location first of all that matched the staging that was in the script, and then eventually found this location that had the car park above the beach and a place where we could put the tiki hut and the toilet there as well, and a good size, not too big, not too small. And then we kind of adjusted the script a little bit to better match the actual location as well. You know, because there are those big, nice houses up. You can sort of see them popping up through the trees in the background, and so like we were able to incorporate that into the script.
Was it not originally that he was trying to buy the house there? Was that added
No, it
because?
was, but I think like in an earlier draft, the house was sort of like through this pathway, and you emerged onto a road, and we actually had some scenes up there outside the house. But then we decided, actually, one of the influences in this decision was a film called Stranger by the Lake, where the camera basically it arrives at at this lake with the main character, and then it stays there for the rest of the film. So we thought actually it will only strengthen it if we never leave. Once he arrives,
Mm,
the camera never leaves the place. Um, because instead of like going up to the house where he's trying to buy it, we can just see it in the distance all the time. Everything's kind of out of
mm,
reach, and it adds to the feeling that he's kind of trapped there. You know, even though it's
yeah.
of his own doing in a way, it's more of like a he's psychologically trapping himself there.
There were a handful of different shots in here that I wanted to ask you about the way you did them. And I was immediately gripped in the film when I was noticing the choreography of the first shot. You know, you're just watching the surfers, and then it's the slow pan over to the car, which is perfectly timed to then, you know, lead you in. Is that like pretty difficult to nail, or did that just take a couple tries?
It was a tricky one to try and to get, yeah, because I wanted to have like an interesting opening to the film that, and I wanted the voiceover from the script to be off camera until we met the guy. So we had to make sure that the weather was going to be good for some surf that day, so that we could film the people surfing, and then zoom out slowly at the same time as panning across, and then timing the car coming in. But Nick's an amazing driver, so he was actually driving the car, so his timing was impeccable. Um, but we did end up shooting it twice, as in like two different times a day. We shot in the morning, and then we reshot it in the evening. The light was actually nicer, and It's like water is interesting because sometimes the waves can look great when they're front lit and they're very glassy, and other times they can look really interesting when it's a little bit more backlit, you know,
Mm,
and you get the colors coming through the waves. So
yeah.
yeah, we reshot it basically, but I kind of knew we'd end up doing that because it was just a little bit dull the first time.
Is that something where you like practice the movement and like counted how long it took to achieve, and then you're like, all right, back up,
You know, 30
Exactly.
seconds
seconds
worth
worth?
on the
Yeah,
road.
yeah. So the camera, I mean, for the first thing would be try and get the surfers actually surfing a wave.
Mm,
Then that would cue the camera to start panning, and then there was like a little a piece of a bush or tree or something that like once that passed, the first AD was able to cue the car, and then we knew
mm.
that if we kept the speed more or less the same, then the car would enter frame just at the right time. I mean, we had to do a number of takes, but that is quite a technical thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and I appreciate that you guys did that for real and you didn't use like a bush to have a hidden cut,
That
at
was
least
yeah,
sweet.
yeah,
not to my knowledge.
yeah. No, we didn't. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, no, that's
it's
really
not that
cool.
complicated. It just takes a little bit of choreography. But when
Hmm.
everybody's working well, they're brilliant at timing. ADs are great with all that kind of timing.
Nicolas Cage's character is just slowly spiraling throughout the film. Did you want to shoot it chronologically, or are you just jumping all over and like keeping those costumes organized? That because he just constantly is losing stuff or getting sweaty or dirtier,
You know, those
those
Yeah,
times
types of things. And I mean, I'm guessing for someone like him, it's probably not that hard to jump from completely spiraled out the surfer to the guy who just got there.
yeah. I mean, we wanted to go as chronologically as possible, and we did. But it's not. It wasn't possible because we had to go down to the beach to do certain scenes, and then we had to go back to the car park to do other scenes later that we weren't allowed to shoot until later on, or like certain props weren't ready yet, like the rat prop wasn't ready, so we couldn't shoot that until a little bit later, so we had to change the schedule. Um, so I mean, one of the tricky things was like his costume. I mean, it was easy to track. Obviously, like he loses his shoes and his jacket, and then he's got the cut on his foot and the bandage on his foot, and then but once he buys a coffee and he gets that splashed all over his face and all over his shirt, we didn't have that many goes at that because that was going to be his costume then. So whatever
Yeah.
pattern that coffee made all over his shirt was going to be his costume for the rest of the film. So try
Mm.
and get that right. And then there was the bird shit on his shoulder as well that had to, we only had, I think, 2 or 3 goes of that with copies of the shirt.
Mm.
So then once that got set, that was going to be its costume for the rest of the movie. So there was things like that we just had to kind of track. And but it was amazing because obviously at the end of the day he goes home, gets set his costume, goes back to his house, and but then he turns up on set the next day, gone through costume, makeup, and everything. It's just picking up exactly where you left off, the scar on his forehead,
Mm.
blood looking the exact same, and the dirt and everything. So yeah, costume and makeup and hair and everything were great at keeping an eye on all of that.
Yeah. With all the animals that we were talking about and, just the wildlife, and there's a handful of shots of that stuff, like the porcupine, snake, lizard, all that stuff. How many of those are planned shots and how many of those are like, oh, like quick, let's get a shot of this because we might be able to use it later in the edit?
Um, they were so like the birds in the trees that like I needed that for
Hmm.
the bird that shits on him, and so that you understand that okay, he's gonna look for eggs now based on that. So like that was on the request list from B camera, um, but then I had lots of other requests like of lizards and where I didn't know where they were gonna go, and just the nature, so um and that thing that looks like a porcupine is actually an echidna. They're native to
Hmm.
Australia. Um, like it wasn't sure where that was gonna go. But then in the edit, we kind of saw this similarity between um the way Nick was lumbering around the car park like a wild animal and some of the actions of the animals, that there was like a parallel, like he was becoming a wild animal living in the car park, rummaging through the trash for food. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, a lot of the B camera stuff I was asking the second camera team to grab stuff. But yeah, I didn't really know exactly where it was going to go yet.
Yeah. There's a couple times where the surfer is just like daydreaming and it looks like water caustics are on his face. Are you guys using like a mylar sheet for that, or is there a different method that you were getting that
Oh
like
yeah, the
water
reflections.
glint?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
used a few different techniques. I mean, sometimes it was like mylar or something that silvery foil. Is that what you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we used water trays as well, uh,
Mm.
lined with like a mirror. But that can get very intense. It can almost be blinding, especially when you're trying to get the light in his eyes. So we used a couple of different techniques for that. But yeah, it was in camera as a way of kind of going into his dreamy, right up there on Clifftop Drive
Mm.
moments, because I think
Yeah.
it sort of reflected his mental state, really, and his character being this kind of a daydreamer romantic that he thought, getting that house would fix everything.
Another water effect that you guys had, which looked in camera as well, were you guys shooting through a fish tank for those end shots where, like Scally's like rubbing his hand through the water and we see
Yeah,
his
yeah.
face? Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that was a nice touch.
Perspex, Perspex box about, this size and about that deep and
Mm,
about how much water in it that we just set up above Nick and shot through it that way and then shot through it this way, for the reverse.
mm,
And yeah, I knew I needed that scene where everyone's sort of revealing themselves to be quite trippy and strange for the audience to accept it. And I was thinking of the Wizard of Oz, where they're all around Dorothy in bed and saying, and she's like, and you were there, and you were there. Um,
mm.
so that's what kind of inspired that. So we were thinking about various ways of doing that, whether we shoot into like a mirror and then bend it. But then he'd had that fight in the water just beforehand. So I thought, he'd been baptized, put underwater for that effect to be continuing, that he's so dehydrated and stunned and they
Yeah.
also inject him with some drugs. So yeah, kind of gets into
Hmm.
his subjective experience of the whole thing.
Yeah, I like that Wizard of Oz thing. I didn't it didn't feel that way to me when I first watched it, but then hearing you say that, I'm like, oh, that's like exactly what I was witnessing right there.
Yeah,
That's really
yeah.
cool. Since the last time we talked, I went and watched Nocebo, which I really enjoyed as well. There was a specific shot in there. It was like shooting into a car, like again on the windshield. The reflections were super cool. I ended up using that as like some inspiration to change the angle, like in my short film that I was going to be shooting through the windshield. And then I noticed in this film as well the perfect surfboard
Yeah,
reflection,
yeah.
so we can see, like, I'm noticing that you have like this crazy knack for finding the best like angles for these windshield shots, and maybe there's one in Vivarium too that I just don't remember. I'd have to go back and watch because I haven't seen it since, but
Not that much driving in it, but yeah, the that happened by accident in a way. I mean, I'm always looking for a way, like a use of visual language to say more about the storytelling than just the shot, So,
mhm.
that happened by accident with the surfboard. It was the props people just brought it down during prep to show me the board and how we were going to strap it to the roof and everything, and put it on. And then I noticed that like there was a reflection of this surfboard that over the passenger or the driver's seat. So then just thought it kind of made, because he's the surfer, it sort of frames him in this thing, and he's talking to his son about his memory of surfing as a kid, and but he's kind of trapped in this surfboard that he's trying to get back as well.
Mm,
And then there's a second scene later in the film where his wife is on the phone to him. She's saying she's met somebody else, and she's um they're having a kid together, and basically she's not coming back. And we had that same kind of shape, except we started with it being quite sunny, and then we jibbed down the light gradually through the scene. So it's as if all the light is like sucking out of his life, reflecting, how he's
mm,
feeling about all this news that's coming to him, and the shadow of that surfboard gets darker and darker and darker around his
Wow.
face.
Yeah, see, that's why I love your films, because they're just packed full of those things. Like these little details that just when I think I'm catching most of the stuff, there's always like something else. Love that. Nicolas Cage doesn't seem to me to be the type of actor that's afraid to get his hands a little dirty, but when he's drinking the beer off the parking lot
Yeah.
ground, is there any way of doing that better so it's not as like gross, or are you just like, all right, here we go?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing with that is that was like early on when Nick read the script and wanted to do it, and we got chatting about it. I think he suggested like, oh yeah, and when I'm completely delirious, I could be like drinking out of a puddle. And I remembered it and thinking, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that. And then obviously it was months later when we were going to do it. So I found the a kind of indentation in the car park that would work well. And I knew he was coming from the bathroom after the scene with the dog, and he'd walk this way, and then the puddle could be here. So then I got art department to do a kind of a little silicon molds within the puddle that we could fill up with liquid so that it wouldn't get absorbed by the asphalt, but it also wouldn't be actually on the ground where there could be piss or something. So we set it up, and then I think it was actually our props master Julian who said to Nick, he went to show it to him without, I wasn't there, and Nick was like, "I'm not drinking out of a puddle." What are you talking about? So then I had to go back over and go, "Hey man, this is the puddle." He's like, "I don't remember anything about a puddle." I was like, "It was your idea, it's your blah blah." And he's like, "Okay, okay, I'll do it." And we put like some fake cigarette butts in there, and iced tea that just looked like muddy kind of stale beer. And so he
Mm.
was able to really drink it then, you know.
Yeah. Wow. That I wouldn't have thought about the silicon mold. Like that's very creative to do. That's also really funny. You didn't remember saying something like that. There are so many moving parts to the story. Like, is that hard to not become overwhelmed with all the things that you need to be keeping track of and like translating it on screen? I mean, it feels like there's a main story and then there's like 100 side stories that are all like kind of I don't know, it's just like the background. We've got the homeless guy, and then the duality of like how they seem very similar. I mean, even his son and his dog are dead, and Nicolas Cage's character even has a moment where he could kill Scally's dog, and and he's slowly becoming like this homeless person. There's a ton there, and then this whole like it's like the surfer cult, which is like a toxic masculinity, like business coaching. Like there's a lot going on there. Did that overwhelm you?
Not really. I mean, it was in the text and then the subtext. There's like, so there's a script and then there's my interpretation of some of those scenes where I was trying to play with, because I think ultimately it's because it's a subjective point of view film. So like the audience experience the story as Nick's character experienced the story. Like, so he's in every scene. Um, all of these things are happening to him. We never learn anything that he doesn't learn, and we never cut away to any other scenes. For like information from another character. It's only through his eyes, really. So with that approach, it was kind of like he's an unreliable narrator in a way. So that leaves room then for getting inside his head and an interpretation of that, like him splitting off into almost like two people at one point, him seeing himself, and using eyeline, and I suppose your expectations, because audiences have an expectation of structure of film. So like if somebody looks over to something, you expect to cut to see what they're looking at, but if you cut to them looking at themselves, that creates like a strangeness. Like, is that getting into his mind of him seeing himself? So I just prepped a lot of that, and then there was some stuff that I wasn't really, it wasn't in the script, and it wasn't and I wasn't even sure where it would go, but I kind of had it feeling. I needed some stuff of like him as a boy, and him as you know, what might be his father, or maybe it's the bum, or maybe it's him later in the film, or maybe it's him in the past, to be able to play with that kind of um feeling that everything was connected, that the future and the past were connected, and that all of this was like almost like a purgatory that the character is going through, and this Jungian psychological journey that he has to kind of shed the ego and all this to get to the to where he needs to be at the end of the film. So once you've kind of got all those ideas, is really just about uh, seeing how everything will fit in. And a lot of that came in the edit then as well. You know how we structured it and restructured it a little bit. And, yeah.
As a viewer, I love when a movie is like this because I do get something like I watched it twice. So the first time, my main like takeaway and feeling of like what the story was meaning was, you know, it's like about I was getting like drug addict behavior. Like, you know, he's so addicted to wanting the waves more than anything that he would sacrifice anything, including his family or his own health, just to do it. And then he's slowly becoming that person who like literally no one wants to be around him at the beach and whatnot. But then the second time I watched it, I got way more of the you know, like the toxic masculinity cult thing that's going on there, but then the intoxicating feeling that it can be to be accepted by a group that you want to be a part of. And I almost had no feelings of the first watch in the second watch. And so I was like, this is pretty insane to me that, you know, I could have completely different feelings on the second watch. So the photographer character in this film is pretty peculiar to me because she seems to be the only person who doesn't treat him poorly. And like doesn't, you know, question whether or not he's homeless or you know, drugged out or anything like that. Actually gives him her phone. By the end of it, she still tells him, you don't belong here. Could you speak on the significance of that?
Well, she's indigenous. So she's the only person in the film. Like, there's just all these white guys claiming ownership on a beach, whereas, like, technically, none of them belong there apart from the indigenous people of Australia. So, like, you know, and the colonization of Australia was pretty brutal. You know, they killed so many people. It was a total genocide of the indigenous population. So, Miranda Tapsell plays the photographer, yeah, and so she's actually the only one who has this kind of connection to the place. Like, her family, the history is kind of connected to it, and there was a little bit more around that in the script that we trimmed down. Um, she kind of got into a little bit of the history of the massacre that happened on the beach there and all that kind of thing, but it was actually unnecessary. It was piling another theme onto the film, whereas I think her just saying you don't belong here was enough, really, because she was kind of broadly speaking about all of them.
Yeah. Uh, that's really interesting. I'm glad I asked that because that makes so much sense. What about the woman who is smoking a cigarette with dog shit in the same hand?
Yeah, well, it's wanted her to represent that kind of you know, the modern Australian actually, yeah, I'd like to have injected her lips with some extra collagen or something, but we couldn't. But you know, these wealthy you know, velour tracksuit wearing women, but she also, like, yeah, had it was an interesting encounter he has with her, you know, where he expected her to be sympathetic to his you know, him giving out about these guys beating up these French people, and she's like, boys be boys, you know, that there's an acceptance almost of that kind of behavior for locals, only for locals.
And then there's the part that I noticed, it stuck out to me on the second watch when he's on the phone with like his coworker or his boss or something like that. And they're talking about how they were saying that he wasn't wearing shoes or socks at the meeting. Yeah. And I mean, you don't have to confirm or deny any of these things, but it was making me think at first that maybe he is he's already starting to do Scally's course, and that maybe this is like his way of like one of the first steps of asserting his dominance and masculinity in the office, like, you know, be as animalistic as possible, you know, just do
Yeah,
your
yeah,
meeting with no
yeah.
shoes or socks. Or it's maybe just like, you know, because he's such a daydreaming surfer that he just wants to have his toes out. The fact that he ends up getting like baptized into this like surfer cult makes it feel like he's just been going through that same course.
Yeah, in a weird way, it's like he's the cracks are already starting to show. You know, he's obviously missing something in his life. He's got
Mm,
there's something that's that's off, and he's just holding it together. But like the events, like being bullied by these guys in front of his son, to start to peel back the lid on his psyche in a way. Um, so like to me, it was like, you know, his he was probably craving something and was taking his shoes and socks off because he used to go around surfing and write for magazines and stuff. And now he's like
mm.
stuck in a corporate world, and he's at odds with himself. There's something that he's like struggling to get back to, but he's unsure himself. You know, it's somewhere in his subconscious that's starting to bubble up.
Mm-hmm. With your, I guess your filmography right now, what would you say is like the thing that your films have in common besides just you directing them?
I don't know. I suppose they explore contemporary themes, um, probably, which a lot of a lot of films don't reflect the world we live in now. Um, so I mean that's something that draws me to them. And then maybe there's an element of people being kind of trapped, whether they're trapped in their own, you know, patterns or behaviors or relationships, or like it doesn't being trapped doesn't have to be like physically like in Vivarium. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but like there's something maybe that's quite universal about that, because we all understand that feeling of being sort of trapped in something, whether it's a job or uh, behavior that keeps being repeated, or addictions, or you know, there's all sorts of ways of looking at it.
Yeah. When I look at Nocebo, Vivarium, and the Surfer, they're so widely different, but also very like I can tell that you are the one who made them, and it to me is seeming like that there's just so much going on besides the narrative story that's being told to you. And so I was like curious, how do you go about, you know, choosing the next script?
Yeah, probably because of that. You know that like films need to have like a kind of surface plot, narrative, all that kind of stuff. But then for me, it's nice to have something that's under all of that, that you're exploring other things that like people could just enjoy the film as it is. You know, so you could watch The Surfer and it's just like a wild time, and Nick Cage going through a lot of stuff, and like exploding on Pitbull in the film, and you know, and the action and the comedy and the violence and all of that surface level. But you can also analyze it afterwards and enjoy it on a different level, on something a little bit more cerebral level. So they're the kind of films that I enjoy, you know, that linger in your subconscious afterwards a bit. Um, so, but you're right, they are all very different, and different approach to production and everything. So it's really just the story. Trying, you know, the other projects I have are all very different to The Surfer as well, but they probably have weird commonalities. I don't know yet.
Mm, yeah. So have you selected your next script?
Yeah, I'm working on two, three different projects, and they're all at kind of different levels of readiness. So I don't know exactly which one I'm going to do next. It depends. It's always like about raising the finance with independent films, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of the time is tied into casting, and which is time consuming and slightly out of your hands. You have to kind of wait until you have the
Hmm.
right actors.
Yeah. How many short films did you do before you started doing full length features?
I did like a bunch of kind of like very short shorts. Like I did a couple that were like a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Um, and then the first kind of commissioned short film I got financing from Screen Ireland was a film called Changes, which is like 3 minutes, I think. And then another one was maybe like 6 minutes called Defaced that I did after that. And it probably did some music videos and stuff in between. And then I made a short film called Foxes.
I saw that one.
And then I did Without Name as the first feature after that, which is in 2016. So I mean, I don't actually know how many, maybe like five or something, six.
Yeah.
Depends on how you qualify it being a short film, like whether
Yeah.
a minute long thing with no dialogue is a short film. I mean, I think so, but they were animated. Like my first few things, I just did myself. I animated them in After Effects.
Hmm. So you using like shape layers and doing that, or
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah, loads of
Cool.
layers and joining them together and that kind of
Hmm.
thing. The scene in the Surfer where Nick smokes the pipe and then things start getting weird and the
Just circling around his head
yeah, and the kind
thing.
of everything kind of melting around him and his eyes getting really big and all that. I did all of that
Nice.
in After Effects because I kind of knew the vibe I was going for.
So with those short films, did you like so one of them you got funding from Screen Ireland and then the rest were you just funding yourself or just keeping super basically no budget to it or
Yeah, I got two of them funded by Screen Ireland, and I got one of them was funded by Sony PlayStation. I think they had like 500 euro or something, or
Mm.
it's basically nothing. And other ones were kind of like maybe a competition or something that I just go make something for, uh,
Gotcha.
for yeah, but all yeah, like for nothing. And the music videos I did as well. I did them all for nothing, but you learn loads when you're making something, so it's not really for nothing. You get a lot.
Yeah. I'm guessing this was not your first film festival experience. You went to Cannes, right?
Yeah, Vivarium premiered at Cannes as well, but in Critics Week, which is a different strand. But it was my first time premiering in official selection at Cannes in the
Hmm.
Palais in the massive theater, like over I don't know 2,500 people in the audience or whatever. Uh,
Yeah.
so that was great. Yeah.
Is that a stressful feeling watching the film with like all these people here? And you've probably seen the film like 1,000 times by then, and you're like, "Oh God!" Like,
I think I used to. It used to make me more nervous. Now, I mean, it's maybe my first film, but it's now I don't really mind because I don't have to do anything. It's out of my hands. Someone presses
mhm.
play. That's it. I mean, it's made now,
Yeah.
so it makes no odds. But if people like it, great. If they don't like it, well, whatever.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, the job's done, and I can't. There's nothing I can do. I'm not going to go back into the edit and change it if somebody thinks that something wasn't good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you have that same approach when it comes to Premiere? Like, where you're like, well, it's out of my hands. You either like it or you don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a way that you would need to think. Because I think, especially with the types of films like yours, that it's not just the story that, is being presented, I think can frustrate a lot of people because they're looking for the definitive answers. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
you see them on social media like welling up with anger because, they don't
Everything
know what
was
happened.
explained to them or whatever. Yeah. And sometimes
Yeah.
that's interesting though, because it's a film's obviously triggered something in them, enough feeling
Hmm.
for them to be frustrated or for them to want more. And a lot of the time, there's loads of these, you know, whatever the movie title is, explained on YouTube.
Hmm.
So like people tend to go straight to like wanting someone to tell them what it was about, as opposed to just thinking about it themselves and drawing their own conclusions. But I mean, I think a lot of that is about people going to a film and then discussing it with their peers afterwards. Like going to see a film with friends is great because then it can be a discussion. Because there's no right or wrong answer how something is interpreted. You're not going to go and see go to a art exhibition and look at a painting and then go home and just Google what does it mean without just kind of
Yeah.
like appreciating it for whatever it means to you.
Hmm. Well, the last question before we wrap this up: when you are trying to secure Nicolas Cage for your main character, is that is that anything that you had to do? Like, do you just send him the script? Is that enough? Did you have to meet him and pitch the film to him? Like how did that all go down?
So we sent the script via, I mean, the producer sent scripts to his manager. His manager sent it to him. He had seen Vivarium, so he kind of was like, oh, this is the guy who did that. Then he read the script and he really liked it. Then he checked out Nocebo and he liked that too. And then he said he wanted to meet me. So then we arranged a Zoom. And it's basically, it's a bit of a, I suppose they're kind of, if it's a movie star, they're interviewing you basically to see if you're going to get on or, you have the same outlook on the film. So we met and we got on really well. He's into the same kind of films as me, similar sense of humor, and he was excited to make it because he thought it was very different to everything he'd ever read. He actually was saying that like if he was to write a short story, this is the kind of short story he'd want to be able to write. So
Mm.
so yeah, then once he comes on board, then you can kind of we launched sales at Cannes the year before, and then we premiered 1 year later back at Cannes.
Yeah. And then after that whole working relationship, do you tend to stay in contact with your actors, cast, or like all your cast and crew and all that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, you spend so much time with them that
Mm.
they're kind of bound together for life by making a film. Well, the people I work with, anyway, I've stayed in touch with them all. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to see Nick later on today. We're doing a Q&A at in LA for the launch of the film.
Awesome. Well, Lorcan, thank you so much for making the time. I was super pumped to have you back on here, and thank you for letting me check out the film a little early. For those who haven't seen it yet, because it's not out, do you want to like fill in like the
Yeah, it's
dates
coming
or
out
like
in
when
the
it comes
US. It's
out?
out on May 2nd.
Okay.
So pretty soon. Go and see it with your friends because like independent cinema, I think, is like a collaboration between filmmakers and the audience. Because if the audience need to go and see the movies for the filmmakers to keep on making the movies, otherwise you'll only end up with studio films, and that'll just be quite boring.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, man. Good to see you again.